He's our Imam furthermore, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. But like, you started with this.
Bringing the podcast to a close, let's talk about things which are somewhat associated with the Salafi manhaj in terms of when it comes to these kind of incidents. What can we do in the West? And two things that kind of stand out. I mean, let's put aside petitions and writing to your MPs and stuff like that, because I don't think, I mean, let's not talk about the utility and the practical utility of it, but more to do with the fact that you write a letter to your MP, whether he or she responds and what you apply pressure and so forth. I think boycott and protest are two very specific things which sometimes is correctly or incorrectly associated with the Salafi manhaj, or brothers who subscribe to that, with regards to its permissibility and impermissibility. For example, I'm not going to mention no names, there was a brother who came out recently and said that, look, you know, for the Muslims in the Muslim world, if you're boycotting things if you're boycotting things in the Muslim world, you know, you have to look into the fact whether there's existing agreements and deals with Israeli companies and the Hukam and the government and so forth. And there was a massive outrage and response to that. So what's your personal thoughts on boycotting things like Puma, who are invested in illegal settlements in the West Bank, Siemens and HP, who provide technological hardware for the Israelis to oppress and surveil our brothers and sisters? What's your thoughts on boycott?
The scholars mentioned boycotting helps, it benefits the cause of the Muslims, then of course it should be done. Of course, I boycotted France. I don't buy any French products. As in any French product, I don't buy. People who know me from I had a thing for designer clothes. I mean, I never purchased it even.
Okay.
But point being is that, look, as in, someone might misunderstand what the scholars do mention. If you've already purchased something, then you're also not allowed to destroy your wealth. So if you've got some product, I'm saying you have to break them, destroy them, but don't buy any more. Does that make sense? So if it helps, inshallah ta'ala. But protesting, the reason why...
Great, we don't discuss these things as solutions, by the way. That needs to be made abundantly clear. We're talking about these are...
helps, aids and supports.
Yeah, actions to either raise awareness, to aid, to raise awareness, to bring pressure, whatever alleviation we can bring to the Muslims, whatever it is.
I honestly believe that Wallahu a'lam, not that my personal perspective and views has much bearing. We have ulama, but I feel like a lot of the people that adhere to the methodology of the Sahaba and the Salaf Salih, they misunderstand the reality of protesting. I believe protest is misunderstood across the board. I even believe those guys who protest misunderstand it. But definitely I believe protesting is misunderstood amongst the brothers. There are different reasons why scholars gave. Because remember, protesting is a thing that's new. Protesting is something that came as a result of democracy. Like democratic institutions are, what's the word, not governed, but
it's basically
elections and protesting is how you keep the power with the people.
So
right,
it's a civil right that the people have to voice their discontent, support whatever it may be towards policy, domestic, foreign or not. It's an inalienable right of someone living in a democracy 100%. Or in a functioning state.
100%. So the point here is that because it's something new, there's no ayah from the Quran or Sunnah that tells you democracy is permissible or not. So the question is, we've got this new thing that's come. Does that make sense? What do we do? You see some scholars differentiating between protesting in the land of the Muslims and in the lands of the kuffar. And then we see some scholars saying all circumstances, making no differentiation. And then we see some scholars mention that this is a bid'ah, and some scholars mention no, it's not a bid'ah, but they mention that it's impermissible because of X, Y, Z things that happen. Other scholars mention that, you know what, if you can avoid certain harams that take place,
it's permissible.
But does it actually solve the problem? As in, is it actually a vehicle that you can drive to get to your destination? So point is that the protesting thing has to be looked at from a lot more of a nuanced perspective. Does that make sense? So I used to believe protesting was a bid'ah. I don't hold that view anymore. What I believe about protesting is that protesting is just not useful. I don't believe protesting actually will bear the result or the fruit that people are hoping from it. In very simple terms, when you're protesting, you're asking the guy who, number one, hates you. We're talking about Muslims, right? So protesting is you asking these governments.
So there's been two types of protests. I mean, let's forget about the Muslim one. Let's talk exclusively our reality in the West.
So you're asking.
So there's been two types of protests. There's been protests of the very large protests, like 300,000, 500,000, generally organized by non-Muslims with Muslim or pro-Palestine allies, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Friends of Al-Aqsa, very left-leaning groups, Stop the War, and that's the one that's really got huge numbers. And they're appealing to, obviously, the UK government to call for a ceasefire, call for the ending of illegal settlements, work towards a two-state solution. And then there have been protests exclusively. I'm not mentioning no groups. Then we've done well so far not to mention groups and individuals and name themselves, who have exclusively directed their focus on the Muslim embassies because they should be doing jihad al-daf, right? So those two types, right? One was somewhat segregated because the numbers were significantly smaller and exclusively a Muslim call to the Muslim armies, but then the far larger one, right, is mixed and
some of our
predominantly
protests don't even work in the first place if it's not a large number. So we can already rule out the brothers that are doing it in small numbers, because your voice has to be loud enough and has to be strong enough that it gets heard and it has enough force that whoever you're trying to reach out to, these leaders, these governments, are going to listen to you. So already if you're protesting in small numbers...
Quick one.
Go for it.
What if the Muslims, they say, look, we don't have the ability. I know it's linked to the whole conversation about sins and where we are in terms of our deen and stuff like this, but we attend these protests so at least we can meet Allah on the final day and say, Ya Allah, I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something. I wanted to show up.
So why not do something that actually has benefit? That's my point.
Like?
Dua.
There's dua in the protest, Imran.
1 second. So number one, 350,000 people put up for a protest.
Yeah.
If those 250, how long does a protest take? Couple hours. We say 5-6 hours. You're out there.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Even if you put dua to aside for a second, it would actually have more impact.
What makes you think they're not making dua already?
Right. So my question to you is, if the Muslims were making dua and they turn back to Allah the way they deserved, Allah Azza wa Jalla told us He responds to the dua. We'd already had victory. We're not making enough dua. 100%. Shall I tell you something? We talked about jihad, right? We didn't talk about dua. Every jihad the Prophet did.
My last question.
If I could just mention this point.
Of course.
Every jihad the Prophet did, his dua. The Battle of Badr.
Long dua, Abu Bakr told him to stop.
I'm saying, where is that from us? I'm saying, because the Prophet didn't protest, right? He didn't protest.
Have you never heard the argument that when they went out in public?
But that's not protest. That wasn't a protest.
It was a call.
It wasn't a protest. It was
a public display of protest against the existing order of the day.
Those are all ta'wilat that we've added. Those are all just interpretations we added. They just went out to make a point we're together.
And we're Muslim.
But protesting is I'm screaming to change policy, to change law, to engage, they weren't.
I'm just playing with semantics.
Yeah, okay, of course. But it wasn't a protest.
But what would they say? They're protesting against Quraysh to believe and accept Islam.
The first people that protested were the Khawarij. They came, they put Uthman under siege and they protested. The first people to protest, the closest thing that you could call to a protest that they have today is what the Khawarij did. The Prophet never protested. And that's not a strong argument. Look, I was very just. I said protest is not bid'ah. I don't believe that's a strong argument, even though many ulama of our scholars mention it's bid'ah. But that's not a strong argument. You know what I'm saying? Not every argument just is worth even like paying attention to. My point is that let's just assume protesting is permissible. Let's even just assume protesting has benefit. I'm saying the Prophet ﷺ done jihad and he done dua. Why is it that dua has been undermined?
Who tells you that they're not making dua already, Imran?
I'm not here to judge no one. All I'm saying is that the rhetoric I hear is we need more than dua. You guys talk about dua, we need some practical solutions. We hear calls to protest, we don't hear calls to dua. I'm saying the Prophet done jihad and he spent the whole night begging Allah for victory. I'm saying the Battle of Ahzab, which is probably the closest thing that you can compare to what the Prophet went through to what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, the Prophet was making dua. My question is now, do the Muslims know the du'as the Prophet made when it came to battle?
Many wouldn't.
As
in the specific du'as?
But that's what I'm saying. Is that not problematic? I'm saying this situation of violence and bloodshed. The Prophet said there was a dua and look, we can go more into protest. I'm saying let's for argument's sake say protest is even benefit. Let's just say it even has beneficials. Let's just say it's not wajib, it's not recommended, but let's just say it's permissible for argument's sake.
I'm talking from the point of a Muslim wanted to say that this is something I did.
I'm saying why not? I'm saying why not spend those 6 hours making dua? The Prophet spent the whole night making dua. and Allah gave victory. Because look what Allah said. Allah said, إِذْ تَسْتَغِيثُونَ رَبَّكُمْ فَاسْتَجَابَ لَكُم.
They could have been praying all night, Habibi.
Could have, should have, would have. That's not my business.
It could have been.
I'm saying do it. I'm saying if you do, I have husnul dhan of Allah. And we as Muslims should have husnul dhan of Allah.
Do you have husnul dhan of the Muslims?
Of course I do.
Because my last question to you was this, to wrap up this entire podcast, was some would find it refreshing to see you here, to hear what you have said. But some, and this is my final question to you for this podcast, some would say there is still this
I just feel that I feel the protest. I really want to drag that point because I feel like if I came here to tell the people that the unanimous consensus is jihad al-daf, and you can't do that, then the thing that you can do, if you don't understand this from this podcast, spend your days, every moment waking up the last day of the night, between the adhan and the qama, in the last part of the tashahhud, in your sujood, okay, making dua to Allah to give victory to our Palestinian brothers and sisters, 100%. Then I haven't done my job. I haven't done my job, because at the very least, that's what you could do. I'm saying Allah Azza wa Jalla said to the Prophet, إِذْ تَسْتَغِيثُونَ رَبَّكُمْ فَاسْتَجَابَ لَكُمْ. Allah said, Muhammad, you didn't just make dua, you begged, you called out, you cried in desperation. And your Lord responded, He sent angels down. I'm saying the Prophet would make du'as. People, take this from me, please. When the Prophet feared the enemy attacking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet would say, Allahumma inna naj'aluka fi nuhurihim wa na'udhu bika min shururihim. Oh Allah, we ask you to restrain them by their necks, and we seek refuge in you from their evil. The Prophet would make dua at the Battle of Ahzab, Allahumma munzil al-kitab. Oh Allah, the one who sent down the book. Wa sari' al-hisab, the one who's swift to account. Ihzim al-ahzab, Allah destroy these groups that have come. Allahumma ihzim, Allah destroy them, wazalzilhum, shake them, Ya Rab. Many other du'as I can give you. The du'a that I mentioned that the prophets and those who fought with the prophets made. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا ذُنُوبَنَا وَإِسْرَافَنَا فِي أَمْرِنَا وَثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَنَا وَانْصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ. Oh Allah, forgive us for our sins and our transgressions and our trespasses, and make us firm and give us victory over the disbelieving people. I'm not even like, truth be told, I would love to sit here and say, brothers, protest is not beneficial. Don't do it. Leave it off. People know my stance. I'm not even going to try and do that. You know why? Because people are doing it anyway. I'm saying, okay. If you really are going to insist on doing that, I'm not here to judge you, but I'm not saying you're not. I just
make du'as as well, lots of it.
More than the protesting. Because there we have a text first. I mean, just so we're clear, I don't agree with protesting, and I tell you not to go. But I'm saying, if you're not going to listen to me, and you're going to take that anyway, and you're going to look past all of the sins that happen in protesting, bearing in mind that we are in these situations because of our distance from Allah Azza wa Jalla and His deen, right? But there's going to be sins in protesting. You'll be sitting next to a guy who's going to go and penetrate and sodomize another guy tonight. And you're gonna expect Allah to give you victory because you're standing next to a guy who's gonna literally insert his genitals into another man's back passage. Does that make sense? And these are the guys who have called for. If you feel like that's where victory is gonna come from, well, okay, I'm not even here to debate you on that.
Let's talk about the exclusion.
But I'm saying at least this du'a thing, like I'm saying, the Prophet said, the one who stays from one salah to another salah, waiting from one salah to another, ذَلِكُمُ الرِّبَاطِ. That is ribat. The ribat is the mujahideen who stand on the borders of the Muslims defending them. I said, we can't even stand from one salah to another salah. Stand from one salah to another salah making dua. Just wait in the masjid from one salah to another salah. The Prophet said, أَلَا أُخْبِرُكُمْ بِخَيْرِ أَعْمَالِكُمْ. Shall I not inform you of your greatest actions? وَأَزْكَاهَا عِنْدَ مَلِيكِكُمْ. They're the most purest before your king. وَأَرْفَعْ فِي دَرَجَاتِكُمْ. And they are what? The highest in terms of lifting your ranks. خَيْرٌ is better than you meeting the enemy in battlefield, him striking your neck, you striking his neck. The Sahaba said, Bala ya Rasul. What is this action? That's better than me beating the enemy, him striking me, me striking him. What's better than shahada and jihad? The Prophet said, dhikrullah. Dhikr. So I'm saying, and by the way, I mentioned the ayah, Surah Al-Anfal, Allah said for the mujahideen, وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Do dhikr on the battlefield so you can be successful. Because if you're on the battlefield and you're not doing dhikr, you're depriving yourself of that which Allah has told you will bring you success. So my point is, do adhkar, okay? Do dua, beg Allah. I'm saying, fix your personal situation with your Lord. Then raise your hand and say, Allah, give us tawfiq. Ya Allah, liberate our brothers and sisters. Ya Allah, give us the ability to help them, to aid them. Does that make sense? I'm saying, at the very least, if we're not going to take that which has been legislated, there's ayat for it. Promise from Allah. If you make dua to me, I will respond. Promise, akhi. Promise from Allah that if you make dua to me, if you make tawbah, I will rectify your affairs. If we're not going to do that, at the very least, I'm saying, wallahi, then we're part of the problem. Part of the problem.
My last question to you, to wrap up the podcast, and it's absolutely related to the point you've just made.
Sure.
Some would ask, many may posit that, look, why is there this insistence with those who come from a particular leaning? We spoke about this before the podcast. Those who subscribe or may identify to be from the Salafi spectrum, the Salafi manhaj. Why is there this disdain and lack of husn al-dhan and harshness towards the Muslims in terms of whatever's happening in the ummah, the calamities, the oppression, the occupation, just the madness that we've experienced collectively for the last 100, 150 years, the bloodshed, all of it? Why does it always come back to this blaming the Muslims, blaming the laity, disproportionately focusing on mine and yours shortcomings, as opposed to looking at who has more responsibility to change the situation, which is also has textual premise. When the ulama of Ahl Sunnah, irrespective of what leaning they came from, they spoke about the responsibility that bears on the neck of hukam. There's actually, we know from the text that there's specific punishments and elevation of just rulers and unjust rulers and so forth and stuff like this. One of the shades on the day of judgment will be the one who's a just ruler. Correct. Right? So what I'm saying is, and I'm going to wrap up with this, my last question to you. Why is what appears to be disdain, blame on the ummah, on the Muslims, when it comes to brothers who come from this particular leaning? Because they could ask, Imran said to us that if you can't do jihad ad-daf,
I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, no. We're talking about this. Okay, subhanAllah, I'm so sorry. But people should assume we're talking about this as a hypothetical situation.
We live in a day and age with bad assumptions.
Right.
Tap my name on Twitter, you'll see.
Absolutely, of course, I know it's wild on Twitter. If we talk about the ruling itself, that if you're unable to do this, then make lots of dua, meaningful, and beg Allah to not only for him to forgive you for your own sins, but to give us tawfiq and so forth. Brother, who told you we weren't making dua? So why did you assume the brothers who attend protests weren't making dua? Why were you assuming that brothers who attend these protests want to kind of create a distinction between the calls and the chants of the non-Muslims and those specific to the Muslims? Why is there no husn al-dhan for the Muslims and the ummah when it comes to these issues? And I'll wrap up on that.
So you mentioned a couple of things, so I have to unpackage that.
Go on.
Number one, I think it's really important, to separate between the people that understand that the Quran and Sunnah is to be understood in accordance with Sahaba and the Tabi'in and the Atba'u Tabi'in, which are called the Salaf Salih. One of the reasons that you were shocked when I reached out to you is because, correct me if I'm wrong, I hope I'm not making a bad assumption here, but it's not differentiated, the difference between us and those guys.
I know there's some differences, but generally
major differences.
Yeah.
Major differences. I don't see them man to be on the Sunnah. If someone asks me, do these people follow the Salaf? I tell you, no, they don't follow the Salaf. Does that make sense? Even though some might differ with me on that. Put that to one side. There's differences. We deal with things differently. Does that make sense? I was baffed. I didn't know how they could defend it when they were encouraging people to uprise against what happened in Libya not too long ago.
Yeah.
Was it General Haftar?
Yes, Haftar.
Like I said, I'm not into politics. I don't know the full details. But what I know is that they were calling in support of the uprising and the rebellion. When we know that in that the positions of Ahl Sunnah is you don't what? You don't uprise. You don't do khuruj against the rules. So I was baffed. It does make a person wonder what, like who.
And they call for an armed uprising as well.
I'm saying
like weapons.
So people. So the begs the question: who really are you in support of? Like, what really is your agenda? Like, what's the hidden hand that's really behind you, pushing you? Does that make sense? And the way they deal with things is different to how we deal with things. Because the question that you asked about the husn al-dhan, nah, akhi, wallahi, all of the ulama, my ulama of the Sunnah, akhi, I've only ever seen husn al-dhan from them.
Alhamdulillah.
I'm saying we've only ever heard, like someone dropped a comment on this video I released a couple of days ago about the issue of Palestine. Brother saying, when I look at Palestine, I see clean shaves, I see women that are not dressed properly, they need to turn back to Allah. And I rebuked the brother in the comments, and I made a video mention that. I said, when I look at those brothers and sisters there, number one, akhi, We hope Allah sets them martyrs. We can't say for certain anyone is a martyr. That's our aqidah, right? Yeah. But we hope that Allah sets them martyrs. If someone's taken as a martyr, bro, that's an honor. There's something you're doing right. Does that make sense? And they don't have access to the exact same type of Islamic knowledge and scholarship because they've been in this cage, this concentration camp, but they don't necessarily have access to durus and dawrat and books the way that other people in other countries might have. So to judge them by the same standards makes no sense. And I've seen videos of more people dying with La ilaha illallah on their tongue than in my entire life.
Absolutely.
In just a short amount of time. And people are dying daily. But you don't, it's rare someone dies on La ilaha illallah. I saw a kid, a little boy, who's probably 8 years old, telling his sister who's dying, saying shahada, and she's saying la ilaha, saying tamam. Like he's not. His concern is die upon tawheed. So there's deficiencies, no doubt, amongst people. People can always be better, but I am seeing tawheed from those people, which is what the fundamental essence of our deen is from. Absolutely. Every time a video comes, look, they bomb my neighborhood, hasbunallah. That's tawheed as far as I'm concerned. So our ulama don't say this to us. But now let me come to the next part of the question, which I think is the final part, which is that, okay, cool. Allah's not unjust. And I already told you that what's happening to the Palestinian brothers, I don't personally, and I've also done of my Lord, I don't believe he's punishing them. I believe Allah is honoring them as martyrs. Because Allah Azza wa Jalla, what did he say? He said, فَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وَأُخْرِجُوا فالذين هاجروا أخرجوا من ديارهم وأوذوا في سبيلي وقاتلوا وقتلوا لأكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم ولأدخلنهم جنات. Allah said, the ones who were taken out of their houses, who were killed, who were harmed for my sake, Allah says, I'm certainly going to give them paradise. Do you understand? So when I look at them, I don't see that as punishment. I don't see that as humiliation on them. I see that Allah is honoring them. But now let's bring the question back to us. I see the humiliation on us. Does that make sense? Now the question is, if humiliation is taking place, Allah's not going to humiliate people unless they deserve it. And I am not here to blame people. When I go home, bro, I have to ask myself, bro, what did you do today that you could have done better? Does that make sense? That could have been an aid to the Muslims, to the Ummah. What could you have done? Does that make sense? Which is why I'm not beating myself, beefing you right now. And I'm sitting here on this podcast. I'm saying, bro, let's get the bigger problem out of the way. Point being, is that Allah told us in the Quran that this is because of you. Allah told us. Allah said, ظهر الفساد. Akhi, just look at the ayah. في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. The corruption spread in the land because of your hands.
Your hands did, yeah.
I don't know, where's the discussion then? I'm not having, in terms of application, the only person I'm going to apply this on is me. I can't sit there and apply this on you.
So that's, I think that was an important clarification, because there's times because no one rejects that verse, and no one denies that that's absolutely the case. But when you then impose that on an entire nation or an entire people, especially when they've been besieged and killed, which we have heard from some pockets.
No, but I never, as in, what you're talking about?
No, not yourself. No, yeah, brother, there's an old video of Abdul Hakim Murad, Timothy Winters. Old video. I'm not sure if he's changed his position or not, where he's saying, Cambridge Central Mosque. He was saying that the Palestinians are being punished for their betrayal of the Ottomans. So he's saying it was khiyana.
I'm not even saying the Palestinians being betrayed. I'm saying we.
So I'm glad that you said that you start with yourself first.
But that's everything we have to. Otherwise, there's sickness in your heart. When you point one finger at someone else, there's 2-3 pointing back. But what I can also say is that we as an ummah know where we're supposed to be. We as an ummah have, not entirely, because there's always khair in the ummah, but we as an ummah have fallen short. We as an ummah have disobeyed our Lord. We as an ummah have let shirk and bid'ah run rampant in terms of application, in terms of holding to account. But man can only hold myself to account. Does that make sense? But the rhetoric that I don't like is downplaying this issue of we have to turn back to our Lord. Actually, the Prophet said, Allah won't uplift humiliation from you till you come back to your deen. I'm saying, what benefit is there me talk about the rulers? Actually, the Prophet already told you that a time will come, you will have rulers. They will have hearts, the hearts of devils. قُلُوبُهُمْ قُلُوبُ الشَّيَاطِينِ فِي جِثْمَانِ الْإِنسِ, in human bodies. We were already told. So now, can we leave that now? If the ruler's not listening, and he doesn't want to do whatever, he doesn't want to send his army out,
Complicit in the oppression as well.
I'm saying whatever. I've already said his heart's a heart of a devil, so I don't have to even give examples. If there is one that fits this description, I'm saying now, brother, can we leave the ruler now? Can we just talk about what me and you can do?
That's okay.
My point is, can we talk about what me and you can do? Because he's not listening to me. I would love to say, brother, you know, Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Badr. There's a story that's probably not even public, but the ruler of one of the Muslim countries came to his house, and he came to his house because the Sheikh is actually very famous, popular in the Muslim world. He goes to Indonesia. I think 100,000 people. I was told, I verified, but I was told by a brother who was very trustworthy. 100,000 people one time turned up to one of his lectures. So he said, I want to come meet the Sheikh, his house in Medina. And the brother who was very close to the Sheikh at the time, he told his story to one of my teachers who told me. He said, when he came to the Sheikh said to him, listen, he said, I have no desire for that which is in your hand. But I just want to tell you, fear Allah, and fear Allah with regards to your people. I said he could do that. He had a ruler in front of him. He was able to. He spoke to him. He done his wajib. Does that make sense? I'm saying this ruler's not listening to me. I don't have a way to communicate with him. We've already seen millions of people come to the streets in their own countries. They have not listened. I'm saying if you want to take, for example, certain Muslim countries, I won't mention names just to be fair, but certain Muslim countries where the rulers are attending the protests and the rallies, but still nothing's happened.
So, absolutely.
They're involved in the protest and they're actually attending. They're like, you know what, I'm giving you a speech at the protest. You're still not sending an army. Does that make sense? So can we now just turn away from that and hold ourselves to account? Because when they lost the battle of Uhud, Sahaba, Allah said, they said, أَنَّا لَكِ هَذَا. Sorry. They said, how did this happen to us? Allah said, قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Allah said, it was from yourself. You did this yourself. Does that make sense? And the moment Sahaba made Tawbah and they came back, Allah gave them victory.
Imran, it was an absolute pleasure.